So I saw this question online and it said, if you could be told the date and time that you would die, would you choose to know? Now, don't tell me. Just think about it for a minute. If you could know the date and time that you would die, would you choose to know? 96% of people said no. Okay? Except we are consumed with knowing the future. We really are. We want to know what the future holds for us. In fact, we want that control so much that we will try to manipulate and control every little situation so that we will know how the future will work itself out. It's interesting. God doesn't tell us today what's in our future. But there were a few times in the past that he did. We know that from last week, for one thing. But I don't know, do you remember when he told Rebecca? Rebecca, first of all, has got twins inside of her. And they are wrestling, and she asked God, what's the deal? She basically asked him, what's going on with me? And he says, well, you've got two nations inside of you. And they're going to be at odds with one another. In fact, the older will serve the younger. Rebecca was consumed with controlling that situation. She did everything she could to manipulate that situation, even though who's really in control? God was, and he was going to make sure that that's what was going to happen. That's what he told her. But she wanted to manipulate and control that. Think about Peter. Jesus told Peter what he was going to do. You're going to deny me 3 times.
3 times.
And I'm not going to do that. Nope, I'm not going to do that. He didn't believe him. And then as soon as they're in the garden, what does old Peter do in John? I'm going to take out my sword and I'm going to chop this person's ear off. I'm going to defend what I'm not going to do. I'm going to try to manipulate. I'm going to try to control this situation. So let's think about Nebuchadnezzar for a minute. What was he told last week? What did Daniel tell him? On that statue, what part of it is him? I'm the gold head. I'm the gold portion of this statue. But then in the next breath, Daniel says, but someone's going to come and take your kingdom away from you. And that's what this second kingdom represents. So old Nebuchadnezzar has been thinking about just what Daniel told him. And he says, you know what? I don't think that's going to happen. I'm going to control and I'm going to manipulate this situation. He's an egomaniac, by the way, and he has decided that he is going to control millions of people. And that's going to bring us into the beginning of chapter 3. But I want to talk about one other thing that really stands out to me in this, and Mary hit on it a while ago with Hobby Lobby. And those of you that weren't here, Hobby Lobby has been to court once over not having to supply their employees with the morning after pill because they are a religious-based company. And now the government is coming back again and telling them, you're going to have to comply with this. You have to do it. So a second lawsuit has been filed now on that. So when I was born in 1968, and I grew up in the 70s, and there were values that were biblically based values. For example, having sex before marriage, just sleeping with everybody. I was taught that was wrong. There weren't people you didn't talk about that. I watched Little House on the Prairie. That never happened on Little House on the Prairie. I also watched The Waltons. That never happened on The Waltons. It just didn't happen. But then as you go along, what do you see on TV today?
Sex.
Oh, my word. Everyone's, like, we watch a show and this person has slept with every other person, including people of their own
Family.
their own family, their own gender. Their own gender.
Your own gender too?
Okay? So what is happening is there's a void of values going on here. You know, let's do what we want. That's kind of what happened in the 60s, late 60s, is let's just do what we want. A sexual revolution, let's do what we want. But there's this slow digression of tearing down what is valuable. What is valuable. And then they come in, once the values are torn down, they come in with a standard and say, this is the standard. Hobby Lobby, the standard is that you have to supply your employees with a way to terminate a child. The new standard is you cannot tell us what to do. And if you do, you're wrong. You cannot tell me what to do, and if you do, you're the one that is wrong about it. That's the new standard.
We're in control and not God.
That's right, yeah. But we're void of values. Now, do you remember back in chapter 1 of Daniel that he took some articles from the temple? To a Jew, these articles were valuable. They are valuable. They're valuable to their morals. They're valuable to their ethics, to their religion. And how does Nebuchadnezzar devalue those? He puts them in the temple of his God. He devalues what they feel is valuable. Now, in this chapter, he's going to say, I'm going to control you. I'm the one in charge. I have a plan to conform you to my way of thinking. I'm going to control your thoughts, your life. You're going to conform. And isn't that what our world is doing to us? You are going to conform to us. I'm going to be in your thoughts. I'm going to get you to conform. And that's what he has in mind here. So first I want to tell you.
He's almost saying, I am your God.
Of course.
Nebuchadnezzar is saying,
Oh, yeah.
I am your God.
Yeah, I'm going to make these decisions for you, kind of thing. Look at Isaiah. I want you to know where the Jewish mind is and where we are too. Look in Isaiah 44. I'm going to read you some of this. I'm going to start in verse 9. And this is talking about idols. So this is Isaiah 44, verse 9. All who make idols are nothing, and the things they treasure are worthless. Those who would speak up for them are blind. They are ignorant to their own shame. Who shapes a god and casts an idol, which can profit him nothing? He and his kind will be put to shame. Craftsmen are nothing but men. Let them all come together and take their stand. They will be brought down to terror and infamy. The blacksmith takes a tool and works with it in the coals. He shapes an idol with hammers. He forges it with the might of his arm. He gets hungry and loses his strength. He drinks no water and he grows faint. The carpenter measures with a line and makes an outline with a marker. He roughs it out with his chisels and marks it with compasses. He shapes it in the form of man in all his glory, that he may dwell in a shrine. He cut down cedars and perhaps took a cypress or an oak. He let it grow among the trees of the forest, or planted a pine, and the rain made it grow. It is man's fuel for burning. Some of it he takes and he warms himself. He kindles a fire and he bakes bread. But he also fashions a god and he worships it. He makes an idol and bows down to it. Half of the wood that he burns in the fire, over it he prepares his meal, he roasts his meat and eats his fill. He also warms himself and says, "Ah, I am warm, I see the fire." And from the rest he makes a god, his idol. He bows down to it and worships. He prays to it and says, "Save me, because you are my God." They know nothing. They understand nothing. Their eyes are plastered over so they cannot see, and their minds are closed so that they cannot understand. No one stops to think, and no one has the knowledge or understanding to say, "Half of it I used for fuel. I even baked bread over its coals. I roasted meat and ate. Shall I make a detestable thing from what is left? Shall I bow down to a block of wood?" He feeds on ashes. A deluded heart misleads him. He cannot save himself or say, Is not this thing in my right hand a lie? That is powerful, powerful. And God's saying, how foolish are you that you would use part of it to prepare your meal and stay warm, and the other half you fashioned into a lie, or a God that could do nothing for you. Look at Psalms 115. I'm just going to start. Do I have a verse up there? Go to it. Okay. Well, I'll start in verse 1. Not to us, O Lord, not to us, but to your name be the glory because of your love and faithfulness. Why do the nations say, where is their God? Our God is in heaven. He does whatever pleases him. But their idols are silver and gold made by the hands of men. They have mouths, but they cannot speak. Eyes, but they cannot see. They have ears, but they cannot hear. Noses, but they cannot smell. They have hands, but they cannot feel. Feet, but they cannot walk. Nor can they utter a sound with their throats. Those who make them will be like them, and so will all who trust in them. Okay, so knowing what we know about idols, the Bible is very clear about idols. There's no black and white. There just isn't. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were Jews. They knew that bowing down to an idol was against everything they had always been taught. But since they've been in Babylon, their names have been changed to the Babylonian gods. They have for 3 years been educated in the way of the Babylonian and told, you will conform. You will do it. So, I'm going to read the entire chapter. This is so different from what I normally do, but I'm going to read the entire chapter for you, and then we'll talk about it for just a minute. So we're in Daniel 3. King Nebuchadnezzar made an image of gold 90 feet high and 9 feet wide, and he set it up in the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. He then summoned the satraps, the prefects, the governors, the advisors, the treasurers, the judges, the magistrates, and all the other provincial officers to come to the dedication of the image that he had set up. So the satraps, prefects, governors, advisors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, and all the other provincial officials assembled for the dedication of the image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up, and they stood before it. Then the herald loudly proclaimed, this is what you are commanded to do, O peoples, nations, and men of every language. As soon as you hear the sound of the horn, the flute, the zither, the lyre, the harp, the pipes, and all the kinds of music, you must fall down and worship the image of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. Whoever does not fall down and worship will immediately be thrown into a blazing furnace. Therefore, as soon as they heard the sound of the horn, the flute, the zither, the lyre, the harp, and all kinds of music, all the peoples, nations, and men of every language fell down and worshipped the image of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. But at this time, some astrologers came forward, and they denounced the Jews. They said to King Nebuchadnezzar, O king, live forever. You have issued a decree, O king, that everyone who hears the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipes, and all kinds of music must fall down and worship this image of gold, and that whoever does not fall down and worship will be thrown into a blazing furnace. But there are some Jews whom you have set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who pay no attention to you, O king. They neither serve your gods nor worship the image of gold that you have set up. Furious with rage, Nebuchadnezzar summoned Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So these men were brought before the king, and Nebuchadnezzar said to them, Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the image of gold that I have set up? Now, I'm going to give you one more chance. When you hear the sound of the horn, the flute, the zither, the lyre, the harps, the pipes, and all kinds of music, if you are ready to fall down and worship the image that I made, very good. But if you do not worship it, you will be thrown immediately into a blazing furnace. Then what God will be able to rescue you from my hand? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to the king, "O Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to save us from it, and he will rescue us from your hand, O king. But even if he does not, we want you to know, O king, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold that you have set up." Then Nebuchadnezzar was furious with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and his attitude toward them changed. He ordered the furnace heated 7 times hotter than usual, and he commanded some of the strongest soldiers in the army to tie up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and throw them into the blazing furnace. So these men, wearing their robes, their trousers, their turbans, and other clothes, were bound and thrown into the blazing furnace. The king's command was so urgent, and the furnace was so hot, that the flames of the fire killed the soldiers who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and these 3 men, firmly tied, fell into the blazing furnace. Then King Nebuchadnezzar leaped to his feet in amazement, and he asked his advisors, "Weren't there 3 men that we tied up and threw into the fire?" And they replied, "Certainly, O king." And he said, "Look, I see 4 men walking around in the fire, unbound and unharmed, and the 4th looks like a son of the gods." Nebuchadnezzar then approached the opening of the blazing furnace and shouted, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out, come here." So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out of the fire, and the satraps, prefects, governors, and royal advisors all crowded around them. And they saw that the fire had not harmed their bodies, nor was a hair on their heads singed. Their robes were not scorched, and there was no smell of fire on them. Then Nebuchadnezzar said, "Praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and rescued his servants. They trusted in him and defied the king's command and were willing to give up their lives rather than serve or worship any god except their own God. Therefore I decree that the people of any nation or language who say anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be cut into pieces, and their houses be turned into piles of rubble, for no other God can save in this way." And then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. Okay, so the scripture is clear. The king made a god, so another god is born. And don't we have enough gods? Yesterday, I went to the little school, the homeschooling group that Jamie and Greg Lemon have started in Navasota. And they have 20 students. And she said she couldn't believe how many people were interested in the school there. And she says it's because the school district is not very good. She said, but you should see it on Friday night. And you should see their stadium. It is so nice. And everybody is there Friday night for football. And I said, you mean it's like their God? And she was like, yeah. And I was thinking, well, it's interesting that we create other gods for ourselves these days. We have a lot of things that have become gods. My phone every week tells me how much screen time I spent. If I've spent more screen time this week than I did last time, you spent 37% more screen time this week than you did last week. I'm like, oh man, it's amazing to me that we can create other gods for ourselves. And so Nebuchadnezzar thinks, you know what? No one's going to come in and take me off my pedestal. I'm going to control all these millions of people, and I'm going to make a god, and I'm going to make it so impressive that everybody's going to worship this thing. There wasn't even room in the city for him to build this thing. He had to go out to the plain of Dura to have enough room to erect this huge statue. So he does. He goes and he does it. When I was reading about this, in history, they have found numerous clay foundation cylinders. They were buried in the ground under big structures of Babylon. Babylon built a lot of big structures. And these cylinders that were buried under the ground help support these structures have dates and who was king and things like that on them. Well, they started selling them. Recently, one of these sold for $605,000, this clay cylinder that was buried under Babylon. So it's very interesting to read, but they are very much in keeping with the boastful king that he was. He was boastful. The fact that King Nebuchadnezzar would have a statue built of this nature is keeping with his personality and with the history of the king. Once this statue is finished, they're going to have a ceremony and they invite everybody. And what do they have to help dull the senses before you fall down? They're going to make you really emotional. What are they going to use to do that? Music! I got another story for you. When Scott and I were on our trip, we went to stay with some good friends that we had in Australia. They are not members of the Church of Christ. They are religious people, but they're not members of the Church of Christ. And we were going to be there on a Sunday. And Scott and I discussed it beforehand. I was like, what are we going to do? We're going to say, why don't y'all come with us to the Church of Christ, So we brought it up. And we said, is there a Church of Christ in the area that we could attend? It's Sunday morning. And they said, well, we're thinking about going over here to this church that we like to go to. And, why don't y'all come with us? So Scott says, okay, we'll go with you, but we need to be able to take communion. Well, Scott and I had brought our own communion cups, and we ended up having to have communion on our own because they did not offer it. So we got there, and there was music. And the music basically played almost the entire time. The only time the music stopped playing was when he finally got up to deliver his message. It played during every prayer, everything it played. And I knew not one word of this music, and there were no words for you to follow. It was a group on a stage. And everybody's and I'm like but that is exactly what happens. It dulls the senses and you feel like this is what you were here for. Oh, this is so great. This is wonderful. And what does Nebuchadnezzar do? He does exactly the same thing. He uses music to dull their senses and now fall down and worship your God. I will say we had a conversation after we left that place with Gigi and I said, I didn't get anything from that. I said, I couldn't sing with them. And she said, well, it kind of bothers me that they do it during the prayers. And I was like, yeah, we're trying to concentrate. But anyway, it was funny. But this is it's just like it is today. I want you to fall down and I want you to do this. So, and if you choose not to do this, I'm going to make the cost of rejection extremely high for you. You're going to die in a fiery furnace. That's what's going to happen. Jeremiah the prophet and Jeremiah 29 talks specifically about that. I'm going to just tell you what it is. It is Jeremiah, God has told Jeremiah to write something to the exiles, the people that are already in Babylon, okay? Write a letter to them. The letters to the exile, chapter 29. And I'll just read you what it says starting in verse 20, or verse 21. Verse 21. This is what the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, says about Ahab, son of Kaliah, and Zedekiah, son of Messiah, who are prophesying lies to you in my name. I will hand them over to Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, and he will put them to death before your very eyes. Because of them, all the exiles from Judah who are in Babylon will use this curse. The Lord treat you like Zedekiah and Ahab, whom the king of Babylon burned in the fire. So burning in the fire, I just wanted you to see that because that's written to those exiles that are in Babylon. Burning in the fire was a common thing. The Babylonians, that's what they like to do. You're going to find out about chapter 6 what the Medes and Persians like to do, how they like to kill people. But this guy, Babylon, they like to throw people in the fire. So they're gonna use this, and they play the harps and the music, and not everybody does as they are told. So now we have some tattletales. We don't know these guys' names. Every child that attends Bible class knows the name of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Everybody knows them because they are immortalized. Nobody knows or cares about the people that doubt. They don't care. They don't care. So they go and they are bad-mouthing them, basically. There's always going to be people that feel the need to badmouth and bring accusation to God's people. We see it happening today, too. Times have not changed much. They're going to try to devalue your beliefs. And I know I don't like that, but there is somebody else that's watching this that doesn't like it either. And you're just pressing the buttons of God when you do something like that. And that's never a good idea. Nevertheless, these men that come forward, they remain nameless. But they go to the king and they say, "O king, there are some Jews who you set that you made look good over the affairs of the people, and they are paying no attention to you, O king." And that is not what he wants to hear, because he's the gold head. I don't want to hear about how somebody's not paying attention to me, okay? So I am going to have to teach these guys a lesson. So he has them brought in to him, and it's almost like saying, I'm going to give you one more chance. Is it true that you are not going to bow down to the God that I have put up? Are you really going to choose that? I'm going to give you one more chance to do this. And I really think he's probably having a hard time. I can't believe you would defy me like this, and yet he's going to. So, I like verse 15. I like what Nebuchadnezzar says. Nebuchadnezzar says to them, "Then what God will be able to rescue you from my hand?" Wasn't this the king that just one chapter ago, chapter 2, verse 47, said, the king said to Daniel, "Surely your God is the God of gods and the Lord of lords, the revealer of mysteries, for you are able to reveal this mystery." It's amazing what comes out of people's mouths, because that meant absolutely nothing to him. Absolutely, he forgot. He forgot about what he just said, or what he had just said. There's another king that said, "Who is Jehovah that I should obey him?" Do you know who that was? Who is Jehovah? And he said it to two guys standing in front of him that had staffs. Who is Jehovah that... Pharaoh. Pharaoh got a 10-lesson correspondence course on who Jehovah is. And guess what? This haughty king, this proudful king, has set himself up for a lesson.
Yeah.
Nebuchadnezzar needed to learn a few things. So the three then respond to Nebuchadnezzar. And I like verse 16. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied, "O Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this nature." Hobby Lobby should not have to defend themselves. The only person that they're going to have to answer to is God. Okay? That is it. It's interesting. They don't feel the need to answer anything. They don't have to explain their actions. They don't have to justify hurting the opposition in any way. We try everything we can not to duly offend somebody. Unduly offend. I knew there was something. The men feel no need to satisfy the king in this matter. He will have come into conflict. His will come into conflict with the real king, and they are not backing down, and they would offer no further explanation. I think Nebuchadnezzar thought he could frighten them into submission. I have heard this many times in my life. When you have lived constantly in the presence of the king, other little kings don't frighten you anymore, So verses 17 and 18, it says, "If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to save us from it, and he will rescue us from your hand, O king. But even if he does not, we want you to know, O king, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold that you have set up.
That's powerful.
That is powerful. They never doubted that God could do it. He is able. Our God is able. If he so chooses, he is able to do this. And they're going to stand up to it. I mean, there's a lot of purity in this when you think about it. How old are these guys? I honestly don't know. I don't know. And you've heard it. How can someone so young do anything? They're just 3 guys. Just 3 of them. How can 3 do anything? They are foreigners in this land. How can a foreigner do anything? How can this be expected of us, oh God? How in the world can you expect us to be the one? Everyone else is doing this. You know, this is Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Why should we be the ones that stir the pot? That we're going to stir the pot. If we don't bow down, we won't die. If we don't bow down, we will die. But if we do, we could live long, successful lives for God if we don't do it. We know it's only an idol, so why shouldn't we just go through the motions and keep everybody happy? The devil works in all kinds of ways to try to get you to say, it's okay for me to do this. It's okay for me to conform. I'm just going to conform this one time. But had they bowed down, their names would be lost to us because they wouldn't be here and I wouldn't be talking to you about it. So in his rage, Nebuchadnezzar heats it to 7 times hotter. Now, how in the world does he know it's 7 times hotter? What's 7 times now? We're going to go throw you in there. I have no idea, but he does it. And in fact, the poor guys that have to bind them up and throw them in are dead because it was so hot they couldn't stand it, you know. The very machine that's supposed to destroy Jews is now destroying their own people. Lonnie said this in his commentary, that the 3 were probably taken to the top of a furnace via a stairway and dropped in from the top. And even though the men that put them in are dead, the 3 were thrown alive into this furnace. There was also probably a side entrance into the furnace in order to remove material as needed. Think about it, they had to be able to get wood in there or something in there to get it hot enough, and so there was a side entrance where they could put people in. And another thing that I thought was kind of funny is the Bible speaks about how many clothes they had on. It specifically names, you know, what they had on their bodies when they were thrown in. They had robes and trousers and turbans and other clothes and all of that. And I'm like, wow. They didn't even bother. I guess in their haste, they didn't even bother to take any clothes off. But I think there's a point being made there with all these clothes that are going in. The scripture also points out that they were firmly tied. You know what? A lot of times what men tie, God loosens. So it doesn't matter that they were tied. But basically, you're not going to escape this. You're going in. I'm going to be sure of it. I've got my biggest men taking care of this duty for me. There is no escape. And I thought it was a little funny that when Nebuchadnezzar sees them in there, they're not bound anymore. The fire got rid of the bounds, but nothing else. Got rid of their ties. It's kind of funny. God can be kind of funny at times.
And then
Yeah, we're going there.
Nebuchadnezzar, when he came near the mouth of a fiery furnace, it didn't burn him like it did the men. It said he came to the mouth and spake to them. Chapter 20,
Yeah, I'm looking.
verse 26.
He approached the opening. I guess he couldn't get too close.
Didn't they get that close?
Maybe he didn't get. Well, I have to think about that.
I just noticed
Maybe I don't know. That's interesting. Okay, so anyway, Nebuchadnezzar says 2 things about that 4th guy that's walking around in there. There's 2 descriptions. The first one is, in verse 25, he says, the 4th looks like a son of the gods. And then on down in verse 28, he says it was an angel that rescued his servants. You know, it's interesting. He calls them 2 different things. He approaches the entrance, and all of a sudden his tone has changed slightly when he orders them to come out. he says in verse 26, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out. Come here. His tone has slightly changed for him to call them servants of the Most High God. Because what he is seeing is no doubt a miracle. A miracle has occurred. So then he looks at them. They come out. The crowd, people are crowded around them, looking at them because there is no evidence of fire on them at all. Not even the smell of fire on them. Every hair is in place. And so Nebuchadnezzar declares that the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego is to be blessed. He pronounces a blessing on God. And still, he is not going to become a one God king. He's got other gods, and this is a great one, but this is the God of fire, he says. It's just another God, but this is the God of fire. You're never going to convert him to their way of thinking. But his invention, that statue that's over there in the plain of Durham, that is no longer exciting. Nobody's talking about that anymore. We got something, it's the same day, and they're not even long. All those people that are playing all those instruments, they're over here looking at Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. The golden image is no longer the spotlight of the day. This event has stolen the spotlight. Right now, in this moment, the God of the three Jews is the one that is worthy of praise. That God is the revealer of secrets. He's the Lord of the fire. He's the protective of captives. He's the offender of idols. He's the frustrator of tyrants. This God is too powerful not to praise. So the king takes his praise a step further when he makes a decree about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego's God. He basically says, therefore I decree in verse 29 that the people of any nation or language who say anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego will be cut into pieces and their houses be turned into piles of rubble. For no other God can save in this way. That's the new decree of the day. Interesting. You think, was it prompted out of fear? Did this new decree, I don't want to offend this God, so I'm going to make a decree that nobody can offend this guy, I think that's probably what he's thinking in this way. But he does give credit to Jehovah for the rescue from fire. And the second decree is replaced. The first decree is replaced by the second decree about their God. So it's really good. The king himself thought he was in control all this time when really God had control of the situation from the beginning. So lessons learned. I've tried to do lessons learned on all of these things, but you're Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and you're going to spend the best years of your life serving Nebuchadnezzar, a man who took you as slaves, killed members of your own family, and yet they served him with excellence. Even still, yeah.
They defied Nebuchadnezzar, but they were protected from harm. They were comforted in their trial. God was glorified, and they were rewarded.
Yes, and they were rewarded.
And God's protection transcends anything we can imagine.
Yeah.
And if we can remember that, God is in control, and that his protection is forever with us.
Yeah. But trials are not always a sign of God's absence. There are many people today that feel like when they're going through something really, really hard, that he's not around. Why would God do this to me, kind of thing. That's not true.
But they never put the blame where it should be, with Satan. You never hear them
That's
say
right.
it's Satan.
It's Satan working.
But
That's
they
right.
never do that. It's always God's fault.
When they're blaming God or they're looking to blame
Yes.
God, that's a lie.
Yeah.
Because it is Satan that's doing that to you. Exactly. That is right. That's what's happening. But God has bigger plans too. Satan's under God.
Yes.
Satan had to go to God to say, hey, can I test? He had to get permission to test Job. Okay? God's all powerful. He's going to use whatever it is to his advantage. But just because we're going through something doesn't mean that he's not there. He is there. And guess what? Sometimes he's going to choose not to deliver us. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego said, if he chooses not to, it doesn't matter. We're still going to do what we have to do. And a lot of times, their testimony alone was glory to God. What they said before they were even thrown into the fire, the testimony that they gave was the glory of God. I mean, so that's amazing. When things go wrong, when we go through the fire, we immediately reach out to God for help and relief. And what happens to us when that relief does not come? Ricky, this is the second time Ricky's called me. He doesn't know I'm in here, I think. Sometimes it's through our pain, through that fire, that the world truly sees what faith in God looks like. Not when things are going well for us, but when we're standing in the midst of a fire. How we behave as a Christian or react as a Christian shows the world how powerful God is. It really does. And also, instead of always asking God to remove the fire, maybe we need to start looking for Jesus in the fire. Because you think about it, there they were in the fire, and who's in there with them? He's there with us all the time. When your focus becomes, where is Jesus in the midst of all of this, it changes your perspective on things. It really does. To know that Jesus is right there with you. We are called to be the body of Christ, the hands and feet of Jesus. When you see someone walking through the fire, they will see Jesus with them when you choose to be the hands and feet of Jesus, willingly stepping into the fire with them. Willingly stepping into that fire. And that, so many times my prayers are, take this away, take this away, take this away. Where is Jesus in the middle of all of this? Have you ever thought of all those displaced Ukrainian people that we have been sending Bibles to for years? Where are they now? They're with their Bibles somewhere else. God will be glorified in everything, and he will find a way. He will find a way for it. And even if he chooses not to rescue us, he's there. He is there. So this lesson is the simplest little lesson in the whole book of Daniel. But to me, it has been super powerful. I was like, wow, this is today. This is today. We have an opportunity to not conform and to stand up for what we know is right. And we should. We should be doing that. So anyway, that's the lesson.